Welcome back to another Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. I have another original creature for you this week, beautifully illustrated by Seth Monster, though I must warn my more squeamish viewers. This is a consummate creepy crawly that some of you may find a bit gruesome. Without warning in place, let's go ahead and take a look at the Massacre bug.
aka the Assassin Bug.
Pathfinder, and Dungeons & Dragons long before it, have been home to hordes of humongous insects, and I've decided to expand that already extensive catalog. For this creature, I've supersized an assassin bug, an insect that has captured my fascination since I was in high school. A resident of the real world, this predatorial insect is perhaps best known as the Buffalo Bill of the bug world, with the way that it clothes its carapace and the carcasses of its kills. It disguises itself in the body of its victims to hunt more prey, but you obviously can't have a pile of corpses waddling towards most people and not have them suspect something is up. Therefore, the Massacre bug simply hides beneath piles of corpses and awaits people checking the pile for treasure or other effects to walk up and become its latest victims. I've designed it as a bit of a glass cannon, giving it considerable damage but leaving it a little fragile. It's obviously an animal like the many other giant insects in the game, which is also how I determined its level, looking at other oversized arthropods and where they fell on the level lineup. Starting in on the basics of our brutal buggy butcher, it uses a high strength bonus, which will be its primary attack stat, and honestly it really ends up being the only standout ability of its scores. Dexterity in between its low and moderate values is its next highest ability, and that's just based on the idea of it being nimble enough to warrant the assassin epithet of its smaller version. Its constitution and wisdom are both low, and its intelligence and charisma are even lower still. Its perception is merely moderate, as it's meant mostly as an ambush predator, but it does have dark vision, based on the likes of the giant mantis, which has a similar feature. Its dexterity affords it a low acrobatics that it mainly uses for the basic benefits such as balancing on uneven ground, whereas its moderate stealth is a bit more pertinent to its overall design, being the basis of how it hides itself among the corpses and prepares itself to strike. However, athletics is its standout skill here. It comes out on top with a high bonus calling to mind its high strength, which it will use to capture prey in its vicious claws. As a giant insect, the Massacre bug is slightly susceptible to squashing. It starts with a moderate armor class, which means it isn't too hard to hit. Its hit points are also only moderate, which might make you think it's far too fragile a fiend to face off with your friends. However, it does have another aspect that bolsters this slightly, which we aren't going to talk about just yet. Well, before we get to that, we have its saving throws, which feature some possibly predictable values. Its high reflex save is pulled from its dexterity being the best of its ability scores related to saving throws, and while its constitution and wisdom are the same value, I differentiated its fortitude and will between a moderate and low value respectively. It's a pretty standard array as far as saving throws go, but the defenses aren't what's interesting about the Massacre bug. As promised, the Massacre bug is a bit of a glass cannon, and to that end, both of its attacks use a high bonus. They both have some reach to them, but the legs specifically feature the agile trait as well as the grab ability, though they only deal moderate damage. These are its forelimbs, which it uses to capture prey, and once it has them in hand, which feels like the wrong word, it can follow it up with a proboscis strike.
When it's not using it, it keeps it folded up, like a switchblade.
This attack features the backstabber trait to add just a tiny bit of extra spice on an already high value for its damage. Now these probably seem pretty basic, but they, along with the other features of its kit, do make it a terror in combat, which you can actually see directly over on the Monster Mash, where we had a quick little 3-round combat for this creature. However, the first thing I want to discuss is not directly a combat ability. It's something to be used in exploration. Corpse Pile details how the Massacre bug is able to make itself a coat of cadavers, which it is able to hide within akin to creatures such as the Skull Peeler, or creatures like the Mimic with the Deception skill. Additionally, these abundant bodies provide the Massacre bug with 20 temporary hit points, which puts its HP in between moderate and high. So this gives it a bit of a buffer before players start chipping away at its actual HP. Those enhanced stealth capabilities of a buried Massacre bug lead into its Assassin Strike reaction. This can really only be used at the start of an encounter, as this triggers when a creature moves adjacent to the pile of bodies that the Massacre bug is hidden within. It allows it to use a leg or proboscis strike, and if this strike is a critical success, it can add an extra effect related to that specific strike. In the case of a leg, it just gets a chance to use its grab, but if it uses its proboscis, it can follow that up with one of its unique actions, Inject Acid. This is a simple ability that is specifically meant to follow up a proboscis strike, and allows the Massacre bug to inject a creature with its digestive juices, just as assassin bugs do in real life.
The assassin slurps it all up, back through his deadly straw.
This takes the form of persistent acid damage, with the unique aspect of this being that since the acid is inside the creature, others can provide the creature with assisted recovery. It's basic, but I like the flavor of it. I think it's a fun little thematic to add to this sort of effect. That does mean we are left with Warning Rasp. Stridulation is the act of producing sounds by rubbing body parts together. Those of you out there are probably most familiar with crickets for conducting such cacophonies. However, while many creatures stridulate to attract mates or declare their territory, the Massacre bug, and assassin bugs, specifically do this as a warning sign to other creatures, which is where Warning Rasp comes into play. This auditory effect requires all creatures within 15 feet to attempt a high DC will save, and become some value of frightened unless they critically succeed on their save. And if they critically fail on their save, this fear is so deep, so instinctual, that they have to attempt a moderate DC will save whenever they attempt to draw closer to the source of their fear, as their body screams at them not to approach the evident threat. I personally think this is a little bit more interesting than the fleeing condition, but if you think it's too complicated, you can just swap this effect out for fleeing instead. Make it last a round or so. But that is our Massacre bug. Covered in corpses, this colossal crawler creeps in crepuscular caverns, crouching under cadavers until cavaliers and their companions carouse too close. I love me some bugs, the bigger the better, so I'm happier to present this one to you guys. Encounter-wise, this creature can really fit in anywhere that you can fit a pile of corpses, but I particularly like the idea of hiding one in a dungeon, buried in the bodies of adventurers that it has already slain, looking like a pretty pile of treasure for the next heroes to pick through. Alternatively, it could be fun to run a Massacre bug as the minion or mount of a necromancer, who raises the corpses it collects as undead to sick on the heroes. Let me know what you think of this creature and what other sorts of monsters you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you've seen here and want more, be sure to leave a like and then subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching and have a monstrous Monday.
This freak